Hello everyone, welcome to another OEM live stream. I'm pleased to be here. My name's Anna Olson. I am a baker and I'm just gonna hit my screen to, there we go, come up live on my chat thread. I hope you're all doing very well today. I am making a delicious coconut pineapple cake. So this is a loaf cake. You could serve it for breakfast. It's not over the top decadent, but you could also enjoy it with a cup of tea or even as dessert. It's a really easy recipe to make, so I wanted to focus on the adaptability, the versatility of this recipe. It adapts easily to a gluten-free version and a vegan version, and I tested vegan 2 ways, and I have them here to share with you. I want you to stay with me to the end of this live stream so that I can show you all of those variations tested and verified. First, quick round of hellos to my favorite people. Hello, Miss Esme. Say hello to your sister Lori and your parents. Bonnie, Kathy, Mary Beth, Mom, thank you all for joining me. Perhaps some of you are gearing up to Mother's Day weekend. This weekend here in North America, it's Mother's Day. I know in the UK, you celebrate in March. The tulips are blooming. Let me get right into this recipe. I say tulips because I actually went to a tulip farm yesterday and it was incredible. They were in full bloom. You start with a mixing bowl. This is a basic loaf. Preheat your oven to 350. I'm starting with my wet ingredients. Even though technically sugar looks dry, it is a wet ingredient because it dissolves into my liquids. In addition to that, I am adding yogurt. This is full fat, plain yogurt. It's up to you. You can use plain regular yogurt. You can use Greek yogurt. This is really a flexible recipe. Hey, if it can adapt well to gluten-free and vegan baking without a lot of significant change, the difference between plain and Greek yogurt is not going to make a difference. And I will talk about the vegan dairy replacement. I also love this recipe only calls for 6 tablespoons of vegetable oil. When I first was playing with this recipe, I was using butter, but I found I got a longer shelf life and a really good crumb structure using vegetable oil. These days, I'm using a lot of sunflower oil as opposed to others, but I leave it entirely up to you. You could even use olive oil because the big flavors from the pineapple and coconut in this cake are really, they're the ones that take over, and a little citrus zest. I've got orange zest on the go. You know, I give you lots of freedom. I love when you take my recipes and personalize them and make them your own. So in a case like citrus zest, if you would rather have lime with your coconut and pineapple, of course you can do that. Lemon, of course you can do that. And yes, Rob, I see you just weighed in. Rob is our channel manager. If you're new to watching OEM, Rob is our channel manager and he just weighed in. We love hearing where you're viewing from. And I see lots of people from the UK today, someone up, oh, Imelda, another person up early in Australia. Thank you for joining. Oh, Betty too. We've got lots of people from Australia. There we go. And as I was zesting, I probably put in a little extra orange zest while I was talking to you, but that is absolutely fine. I love orange in my desserts, and orange and chocolate. Actually, weigh in here. How do you feel about orange and chocolate as a combination? I'm a big fan. Less fond of chocolate and mint together, even though that's another classic pairing. Let me know how you feel. Do you prefer chocolate orange, chocolate mint, or another chocolate flavor combination? Please, I'll keep an eye on the thread and see what you're writing, and I see you continue to let me know where you're writing from. Wonderful. 3 eggs go into this recipe. It's a really wet batter, and that's part of its secret to its adaptability to vegan and gluten-free baking. Right now, though, I'm using large eggs, 3 large eggs. So I'm showing you the conventional recipe start to finish, and we'll talk about those variations at the very end. Michael, we've got 170 people watching us right now. If you, again, if you're new to the channel, Michael is my sweetie. He's my husband and he runs all the cameras. that we have happening here. Right in front, off to the side, that's the one he's moving around, and we've got our overhead camera too. So in go the eggs, and just a splash of vanilla. Ooh, Mohammed likes the chocolate raspberry combo, I see that. And we've got some chocolate orange fans here. All right, we're all on the same page, I love it. And I'm just gonna relax and take my time mixing this recipe. I hope that's okay with you. I'm not gonna spend an hour on it, but honestly, it's that simple, and I realize we're only 6 minutes in to having our little visit, and I'm halfway through the recipe. So there's nothing particular you're looking for here. The sugar by this time will have dissolved. Everything's evenly combined. And I don't even bother sifting my ingredients in a separate bowl. If you have them handy and your measuring tools handy, or if you wish to pre-measure, you can just hold your sifter over your bowl and sift away. So I've got my all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, just a little bit of cinnamon. Not typical to a coconut pineapple cake, but that little bit of spice, I don't know, it just brings everything together. And just a touch of salt, and I'll sift that right in, and you'll continue to use your whisk as you bring the batter together. You don't need to switch to a spatula now. I save that for when I add my coconut and pineapple. I'll just push that out of the way and give this a little whisk. Everyone's doing well. It's spring here in Southern Ontario. I know if you're watching in Australia, you're at the opposite end, heading into fall and winter, but I'm just so ready for spring. Is there anyone watching from Western Canada? I know Alberta's had one heck of a spring. Not really a spring at all, so I hope you get yours very soon. Well, I see Terry from Saskatchewan. You're watching, so you must have had similar weather coming across the prairies. And thank you for the birthday greetings. Yes, it's my birthday tomorrow. Do I have big plans? Just happy to be at home, and my sweetie is cooking me dinner. So, Lori, you are correct. This flavor combination is in that hummingbird cake family of flavors. And if you've ever heard of Morning Glory cake, that has the coconut and pineapple, but also the addition of apple and carrot to it. So you do have this versatility with this moist, sort of summery style cake. So here we go, just in a matter of seconds, the batter comes together, you whisk it until it's smooth, you no longer see lumps, because you're about to add some with your coconut and pineapple. Now, I've made this recipe so many times, not just gearing up for today's live stream, but also this is a staple recipe of mine, but I've adapted it over the years. I have tested it using fresh pineapple like I have today, diced. I have made this recipe using crushed pineapple, tinned, and I've got the full measurements. You see the full recipes right below the screen. You want to make sure if you're using crushed pineapple that you don't just drain the pineapple, but you actually squeeze the excess juice out of it. Crushed pineapple really holds in its juice. You can also use diced tinned pineapple if that's what you have access to. Drain it really well, and then that you don't have to squeeze firmly, but just give it a press to get some of that excess moisture out. Does it compromise the recipe? Not really. It will add bake time to your recipe at the end of the day. Now, I'm adding my fresh pineapple, and in addition to that, I have my ½ cup of coconut. I believe I call for sweetened in the recipe. By all means, use unsweetened coconut, whatever your preference is. If you want it flaked, if you want it shredded, if you want it desiccated so it's really finely ground, I leave that up to you. And I like the addition of a few golden raisins. Just a little bit of color distraction, a nice gentle sweetness. And when it comes to switching up this recipe, again, giving you some creative options here. Switch out the raisins for another dried fruit if you prefer, or leave them out. The coconut, because it's dry, could be replaced with chopped nuts, walnuts, or pecans, something very tender. The pineapple, now you need, if you want a substitution for the pineapple, then obviously it's not going to be a pineapple cake, but you want to choose a fruit or vegetable with a lot of moisture. So this is where a grated apple, the same volume, or grated carrots would be a fantastic alternative, lending moisture and flavor. But this pineapple coconut combination is, I was gonna say it's bananas, but there are no bananas involved here. And now I just fold these in. But you know how it is. I know you love making chocolate chip cookies. Once you get that base batter done, well then how many chocolate chips you choose to add, if you choose to add nuts, at that point, it's totally up to you. We've got Olivia asking a question, can you use a different oil for this recipe? If you don't like sunflower oil, which is what I've chosen, you could, yes, of course, whatever oil you like to cook with, so long as it's a neutral oil. You don't want something, you can use olive oil, but nothing too powerful. Don't use a big, strong, extra virgin olive oil in this recipe. Now, here's a good question, asking about fresh coconut. Now, here in Canada, by the time we get fresh coconuts, they're not so fresh anymore. I would think, yes, you could use freshly grated coconut, and it would be delicious and lend to that moisture in the recipe. And Michael's nodding his head because I can imagine it would actually make the cake a bit fluffier. I've got my loaf pan greased, lined with parchment. I haven't lined it all the way around, so I greased the sides very well where there's not parchment paper. And this gets scraped into the pan. Ooh, you can actually smell the pineapple, and I can smell the cinnamon too. I don't smell the orange quite yet. That is coming. Now, this is ready for the oven. A reminder again, it's at 350, and typical to any cake that's got a really wet or dense batter, like a banana bread, you want to bake this for a while. This takes 60 to 70 minutes. You check its doneness by inserting a skewer in the center. When it comes out clean, you know you're good. Now, depending on the recipe, sometimes you get a little crack that forms in the top, and that's because when your loaf bakes, the batter on the outside cooks before the inside has cooked. And so it's rising up and setting, but then as your baking powder is activating in the center of the cake, that's pushing your batter up, and that's what creates the crack in the top. So I don't want you to think if you make loaf cakes, if you develop cracks in the top, that's a problem. It's just a sign that all your ingredients are doing exactly what they should. So I'll pop this in the oven. Just gonna move my messy bowl and whisk out of the way because I have a lot to show you now. So first, let me show you the cake that comes out of the oven. Obviously, baking for 60 or 70 minutes, we're not just gonna sit around and wait for the one in the oven. So I made one earlier. And so this is the traditional loaf made with the eggs and the yogurt and using sunflower oil. So it browns nicely, and there, are you on an overhead shot, Michael? So you can,
I'm on A right now.
Okay, if you want to go to an overhead, we can see the little bit, just that little bit of crack as it finishes baking in the center. Jesselyn's asking, can you add chocolate? If you like chocolate with coconut and pineapple, then I think you should do it. And this is where, I love when you personalize recipes and make them your own. Vishal's asking about, will we see me in the kitchen with those drawers again? I'm afraid not. That series has wrapped. I would love to do another studio production, but we'll just see where we're at. In the meantime, this is where to find me, right here on Oh Yum. I'm gonna slice into this so you can see on the inside. I'm not sure, Michael, if you want to zoom in so you can really see that nice, it slices easily, very few crumbs. It's got a nice density without being heavy or too weighty. And again, there's only that 6 tablespoons of oil, which is pretty amazing. And you don't need anything with this. I think it's delicious on its own. I was playing with this recipe and I put a glaze on it just to see how I felt about it. It was just a citrus glaze. I juiced the orange and boiled it a 2-to-1 ratio of sugar to orange juice to cook it into a glaze. I poured it on the cake when it came out of the oven. It set, it added a nice little crunchy layer. It didn't really lend anything more to the recipe. So if you would like to do that, you've just picked up the tip right there. So say a 1/4 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of orange juice, bring that up to a simmer so the sugar dissolves, pour that over your cake if you want to add a glaze to it. You could also do an icing sugar glaze, icing sugar and the juice of the orange, or if you have pineapple juice from the tin, if you're using tinned, that too would make a more substantial glaze on top. But like I said, I don't think this needs it. Now, moving on, I had my end of recipe bite, but I'm not done yet. I'm gonna move this out of the way and show you my variations. So, I have been busy and I have tested to verify the substitution veracity of these. That's my big word for today. I'm done. I'm out of here. Veracity, very fancy. No, but I wanted to verify. I didn't want to just say, yes, I think you could substitute for vegan or gluten-free options. I wanted to prove that it would work. So let's talk about the vegan options first. In place of the dairy yogurt that I used a coconut yogurt. And this is a local coconut yogurt. It's called Coconut Cloud. This is from the Toronto area. And so you can use any non-dairy yogurt, but it's got a nice tang to it that helps, it balances, it works nicely against the pineapple. And I had great success with both recipes using the coconut yogurt. If you'd rather use a different non-dairy yogurt, you need some acidity really in this recipe, but I'll leave that up to you. Now, this is where I had fun. The 2 big non-dairy egg replacements when it comes to vegan baking are in something simple like a loaf cake would be a flax egg, but also I've only played with aquafaba as a whipped non-egg or an egg replacement. So I've only used aquafaba as a meringue, which works wonderfully, but I wanted to see how it baked in a loaf cake. I was very pleasantly surprised. So here we have the 2 examples. On your left, this is the exact same recipe, coconut yogurt, and using 135 mils, so 9 tablespoons of aquafaba. It was essentially the equivalent of draining 1 tin of chickpeas. Save all that liquid, and that's what I used in place of the egg. So it replaces the volume of the egg, but also the protein that is in aquafaba. And can I pull this? Where would you like this, Michael, so you can see it? This is the aquafaba from 1 tin of chickpeas. It doesn't look like much, and you don't have to whip it. You just add this when you add your eggs, the sugar, the coconut yogurt, and then you add this with the oil, whisk, and away you go. Bake time did not change at all. And as you can see, you have a beautiful appearance, and the pineapple and raisins and coconut pieces really show through. Now, I knew when I played with the vegan recipe that it would look different. The flax egg recipe, it would look different. And sure enough, it does. So the middle one, the same coconut yogurt, and I leave it to you to decide your ingredient choices and where you source them. Organic cane sugar is a good choice when you're baking vegan. But the flax egg, you can definitely see the flax seed. And so to make a flax egg, you have to make the equivalent of 3 flax eggs, and I include the proportions, the bottom of the recipe, so it's that same volume. You need 135 ml of tepid water, and then this is 6 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. Now, flaxseed is fantastic for you, so I figure any opportunity to add fiber and not compromise the end result is fantastic. So I'm just gonna stir this so you can see it, because it looks very fluid right now, but as it sits, that flaxseed is going to absorb the water and it becomes almost slippery, and it behaves like an egg when it bakes. So there is clearly a color tone difference when you're using the flax egg, but as you can see, I got a really nice lift from the cake, a nice surface, a bake, the squares, or the slices cut without crumbling, exact same bake time, really no other differences. And I found when I was tasting, I really enjoyed the texture of the flax in this loaf. It's just a different version. Yep, it's already starting to thicken up here. You can see it's becoming a bit slippery and develops a bit of a shine. Well, that's why it's good for us. It holds water. Now, the last variation, I'll have you move over here, Michael. We've got our gluten-free version. So I did use the dairy yogurt and the eggs. But I can say, because I had success with all three of these options, that if you needed to make a gluten-free and vegan version of this cake, you would have success, because really all three were fantastic. Look at how similar these two loaves look. And what I used was a very popular 1-to-1 gluten-free baking blend. And at its base is sweet rice flour, brown rice flour, potato starch, tapioca starch, and some xanthan gum. No dairy products. That is something, if you're baking gluten-free and vegan, be careful. Some baking blends do have dairy ingredients in them, so keep an eye out for that. Oh, we've got a question, good question. I will take a moment, and your questions are fantastic. We've got, could you use homemade aquafaba from cooked chickpeas? That's a question I don't have an answer to. I have never tried that. Does it matter if the flaxseed is brown and golden? No, it doesn't. So golden would obviously not, I'm using brown flaxseed. Golden wouldn't tint it quite as much. Back to my baking blend. It's grittier than all-purpose flour because of the nature of the ground rice. I'm talking to a lot of bakers who are baking gluten-free, and they're finding they're having really good success with a baking blend that has a ground sweet rice flour in it. So I have found this is very easily adaptable. This is also a recipe that suits gluten-free baking because it is very moist to begin with. It has the moisture from the pineapple, the fruit. So by nature, it suits gluten-free baking because you've got room for that gluten-free blend to absorb. The starches replace the protein protein that's in conventional wheat flour that's no longer there. So you get a delicious end result. Bake time was exactly the same. The only difference, I found the taste and texture phenomenal, freshly made and the day after. What I found was, because I had frozen all of these to hold them for you, coming out of the freezer, it just is a little more crumbly when you're slicing it after being frozen. But freshly baked and within a day or two, perfectly fine. So here it is. You've got actually 4 different ways to bake this exact same recipe with success and hopefully make your friends and family very happy. I'll take a couple of minutes now because I see some questions popping up and they're very good ones. So I want to make sure I'm addressing them because this came together so quickly. We've got someone from Buffalo, just down the street. Grace is asking, Michael's waving, you do good wings in Buffalo. Grace asks, could you use a round tin? Yes, actually that brings up a very good point. A standard loaf recipe that makes a 9x5 loaf tin, and this is actually a slightly longer and narrower tin. That volume of batter also can make 12 muffins or an 8-inch square pan or an 8-inch round pan. Or you can even do a 9-inch. What will adjust, obviously, is your bake time. A rounder square pan will take less time than a loaf because this has the height to it. Muffins would take the least amount of time. Surprisingly, not a whole lot less. When I bake muffins, they usually take about 25 minutes. A round cake would be anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes. And this, of course, as a reminder, takes you the 60 to 70 minutes because you've got the height of the volume of the batter there. So I'm going to check out another question here. Okay, Alden is asking about doubling up recipes. Interesting question. With chocolate chip cookies, you shouldn't have too much trouble. I'm sure if you're from Singapore, you're weighing your ingredients. So that's always my first guiding tip. If you're batching up a recipe, try weighing as opposed to using volume, because you will get that precision in measuring that way. I can't really predict why your recipe was dry, but I would say try again. Lizzie, you're asking, could you use coconut flour? Yes, but not as a one-to-one replacement for the wheat flour. You can replace up to 2/3 of that all-purpose flour with the coconut flour. You need to have some starch in there. So tapioca starch is usually the most affordable and accessible and successful. So you would do 2/3 coconut flour, 1/3 coconut starch, and then throw in half a teaspoon of xanthan gum for good measure, just to make sure all those ingredients are binding together. Y. O'Rourke, yes, 100% you can use Greek yogurt. I would say you could even use low fat in this recipe. There's just so much else going on. It really is that versatile and forgiving. Just don't use pre-flavored. Well, mind you, pineapple yogurt, no, it'd be too sweet. We've got a sheet pan question. I don't know if it's a brand or a size. I use a mix. I use a silicone coated standard half sheet pan. It's more of a heavy bake. It doesn't buckle. And I like that because it holds the heat evenly when I'm baking cookies and such. But I also use just the commercial, if I'm looking this way, it's because that's where my stack of baking sheets are. The standard commercial aluminum baking pans, I find they work absolutely fine too. They're easy to clean, they're affordable. I know there are a lot of studies out there about comparing baking pans and their materials. I find the ingredients of a recipe has more impact on how it bakes than the pan itself. Yes, there are some differences, but your oven and the ingredients itself are the real factors when it comes to baking. Okay, and Uzma made the stromboli from last week. If you need something fun to watch and you missed last week's live stream, we made stromboli, that rolled pizza. And she said everybody liked it and the dough was very different with the 00 flour. It really does make a difference. And Alden, you're looking for more savory recipes. Okay, I'm glad, happy to hear that and happy to share. Actually, you'll be happy to know about my next project down the road is primarily savory based. So you have some delicious savory goods to look forward to. Sharon is talking about using less sugar. Yes, I would say you can reduce the sugar. Definitely not down to nothing, but by half. You could use a coconut palm sugar would be a great option, which registers half on the glycemic index as granulated sugar or even organic cane sugar. I leave that up to you. If you're interested in some more sugar-free options, check out my live stream from about a month ago where I made lemon squares, and I made it kind of in this format with various sugar alternatives, so you could see what the difference is there, and that really helps guide you to making those choices for the recipe itself. That's I'm not a dietitian, but I'll speak to the execution of the recipe. Oh, Jen, good question. Oh, first, Betty, can you use self-raising flour? Yes, you can. Just leave the baking powder out because it's already worked into the self-raising flour, and it's a one-to-one substitution there. Jen is asking for high altitude tips. You're at about 5,000 feet. Where are you, Jen? I'm very curious. For those of you who don't know, I went to cooking school at Johnson & Wales University at the Colorado campus that was 10,000 feet above sea level. So we got a crash course in altitude baking, understanding how air pressure is lower. That means there's less resistance. So your baked goods rise up faster, but because the recipes are designed to set at a higher air pressure, they come together and set at a different rate, and so things rise up and then sink. So the things to fix that, a recipe like this will suit will suit high altitude baking well because it's a wet batter. So recipes that have a little extra moisture do better. You want to lower your leavening. So in this case, the recipe calls for 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I would cut that in half. To compensate for that resistance. So it'll rise up more slowly. In that time, your other ingredients are setting. Another tip you can do is increase your oven temperature. Now, in a recipe like this that spends an hour in the oven, you're at risk of overcooking the outside. So what I would do is start a recipe like this, bake it where in Fahrenheit it bakes at 350. I would start it at 375. Let it bake for 10 to 15 minutes at 375, turn it down to 350. So you've got your ingredients moving and setting and finding where they belong, and then they can carry on and continue baking. So I hope that gives you the tips you need. Lori is asking sour cream instead of yogurt. Yes, that will work, definitely. Oh, Jen, you're in northern Nevada below Lake Tahoe. Okay. So you've got, probably some beautiful views, I would imagine. I hope that helped you out with some of your tips. And thank you, Maria, for the birthday greetings. Yes, I am a Taurus, and that is why I am a detail-oriented person, as you can see. So my Mother's Day greetings to all of you who are moms out there and celebrate in North America. Maria, you are just writing from Mexico. Do you celebrate, is there a Mother's Day in Mexico coming up soon? I'd love to know. And for those of you who aren't watching in Mexico, I will be in Mexico City at the end of July. There is a baking expo called Mexipan, and I am one of the key presenters. So if you want to meet me, come on down to Mexipan in Mexico. Another tip while we're talking about little things coming up, I have now launched a newsletter. It's just a monthly newsletter, and you can go to my website. It's annaolson.ca. Sign up for the newsletter. I'm working on the May issue right now, feeling very inspired by brunch and the first local asparagus we just bought. And it's really me that writes the newsletter. So I just wanted to let you know, and I post new recipe links, so you'll be able to access those. Lots of fun. We've got, the questions are rolling in, Michael. This is great to have this little chat time now that we're done baking. Mother's Day is on May 10th in Mexico, so that's on Friday. Wonderful. Well, happy Mother's Day to all the moms in Mexico too. Rolling pin. I typically, since Kriti, I like to use a wood rolling pin most of the time. I use a French tapered rolling pin. You can buy plastic, you want to buy definitely a hardwood. This is an acacia one. Maple is good too. You don't want it to have a shellac or finish on it. I buy the tapered style rolling pins, so that way you actually use the angle. You have your hands on top of the dough so you can feel it. Use the angle to coax your dough, and you can sense it under the pin, so you can create, because we tend to roll dough in circles more often than not. I have a heavier pin with ball bearings when I'm doing something, a bigger batch, or something with a lot of butter, like a lot of butter, like puff pastry. But this is my go-to style of rolling pin. Metal, plastic, the whole ice cube in the freezer, marble. Wood holds an even temperature, and I find it's more predictable to work with, so I hope that helps you. And another great question. You know what? After Rose's question about using whole wheat flour, I'll take one more question and wrap things up, because we're at about the time we usually wrap things up. And thanks, Kathy, for the greetings. Yes, you can use whole wheat flour in this recipe. Now, you can see the difference. It would probably look a lot like the loaf with the flax egg, because you're adding a fiber, and while it looks a little dense, it's not heavy on the palate. With this volume of flour, Typically, my general rule for a whole wheat flour substitution is you can replace up to 50% of the all-purpose flour in a recipe with whole wheat flour, typically without compromising the taste or texture of the baked good. Sometimes if you add 100%, because of the bran in the germ in the whole grain ground flour, it can interrupt that protein development that bonds and holds things and allows them to lift. And sometimes your baked goods can come out seeming more dense or heavy or more crumbly. So I would start with a 50% substitution and then creep your way up. If you have good success and you're happy with it and you want to go further, I would take it from there. I see. Okay, Jane uses the same kind of rolling pin, and we have no more questions. We're just passing along wonderful Mother's Day greetings to each other. I appreciate the birthday greetings. Michael saying hello to everyone too. And this has been lots of fun. Now, I am not back for a few weeks with a live stream. We're off filming some new adventures, and so I'll keep you posted on what's happening. But you know, we love doing live streams. I love connecting with you, sharing. This is what that baking soul is all about. Baking to share for those we love, and you are all fantastic. I appreciate your support over the years that we've been here on Oh Yum, and I will see you very soon. Keep an eye out. Oh, and don't forget, I'm not going away. There is an episode of Spring Favorites that's coming out this Friday, and another one in 2 weeks. So just because I'm not doing a live stream doesn't mean I've got you covered. And in fact, you're definitely gonna wanna make the lemon berry meringue tort that is coming out this Thursday. Well timed for Mother's Day. All right, cheers everyone. Have a great evening. I have some coconut pineapple loaf cake to take care of. See you in a minute, Bonnie.